The Tau will often refer to themselves collectively, at least within the main empire, as 5 castes, 1 people. If you're from the far-side enclaves, it would be 4 castes instead. It is a symbol of the unity all Tau have beneath the ideology of the Tau Va, but the uninitiated, or those who only know the Tau for their military, it can lead to a measure of confusion. After all, no other race quite has a system as rigid as the Tau's, where every individual has an important but also somewhat predetermined role to play in the advancement of the greater good. Today, I want to shine a light on this somewhat, trying to explain how the caste system originated and functions, as well as exploring each caste in a little bit more detail. This is Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. To understand where the castes come from, you have to go back several millennia to the time before the renowned technology of the Tau had even been developed or conceived. The early Tau were plains dwellers, but expanded to live in many biomes on the homeworld Tau, pronounced differently at least by me to help distinguish the world from the species because they're spelt the same. Evolution did the rest as the Tau in these environments adapted to their new surroundings. Those that remained in the plains became strong and adept hunters, whilst those in the high mountains would actually evolve hollow bones and wing-like membrane flaps to aid with travel. Some tribes would found the first true settlements and develop the beginnings of industry, whilst nomadic ones would become traders between the rapidly developing yet disparate societies. However, as the early history of many races and worlds can tell you, these days can lead to rather a lot of violence and strife. So it was on Tau as well, with the tribes of the plains and mountains forming an alliance against the settled Tau who inhabited the river valleys and attacking the traders to keep the settlements from allying in turn. Though the river Tau were able to defend themselves with the development of more advanced weaponry, the wars were perhaps the most troubling period in all of the species' history so far, as trade broke down, harvest failed, and illness ran rampant. This period is known today as the Mont, the Death Age, and it may well have been an event that set the species back by centuries or millennia, but it was brought to an end before it could ever come to that. The legends tell of a mountain plateau city known as Fio'taun that had been under siege for years by the warriors of the plains when strange lights appeared in the sky. Following this auspicious event, a pair of figures emerged, mysterious Tau of whom one came to each tribe at the same time. These individuals somehow were able in a few short hours to do what both sides probably considered impossible, and get the gates of the city open for a parley and negotiation. Mind you, the legends don't really tell of the plains or city dwellers actually doing much talking, as they extol the words of the newcomers speaking of a greater good that should unite all Tau. Both sides rapidly agreed, and across Tau, more of these Ethereals emerged to speak to the rest of the planet and unite them under what is now known as the Tau Va. Following that, a technological and societal revolution began at a frightening speed, and the United Tau went from black powder to anti-grav technology and highly advanced battlesuits in only a few thousand years. But as far as Tau society was concerned, the Ethereals orchestrated the creation of the castes from the 4 types of tribe. During the speech that purportedly took place at Fio'taun, I should point out there are other origin myths, this is just the best known, they spoke of the strength of these 4 groups individually as well as the good they could achieve united by the Tau Va. As such, when the Tau became a unified species, these strengths were played to by assigning each group to a specific societal role, known nowadays as a caste named after the elemental aspect that best represented them. Every individual born to a caste is a member of it until death. There is very little, if any, mixing of duties, and I think absolutely no interbreeding to ensure everyone is able to fulfill their duties to the best of their ability. There is even a word in the Tau language that describes someone whose interests or abilities seem to cross over between the castes. Such a person is known as Vashya, or between spheres, and trust me, it's not a compliment. It is considered against the interests of the Tau Va to change caste, and so it never happens, but it is not impossible for someone described as Vashya to succeed despite the stigma against the idea, After all, it happened to Oshova, who was renowned for being as such. As for the Ethereals, they would remain apart from the other castes and form one for themselves, serving as the rulers and guides of the Tau and their auxiliaries in all matters. So it has been for thousands of Tau Seer, and even without the Ethereals to enforce it, the caste system will likely be an ever-present in Tau society, as shown by the Farsight Enclaves, who have no Ethereals yet maintain the system due to their continued belief in the greater good. Before we move on to the details of each caste, a quick linguistics lesson to help with understanding. The caste and rank of any individual Tau can be found at a glance from their title or name. Caste is first, followed by rank within it. The castes are named in the order I'll address them as Shas, Por, Kor, Fio, and Aun, whilst the ranks in ascending order are Sal, La, Wi, Vre, El, and O. However, it should be noted that there is no shame or stigma attached to being of a lower rank, as every member of every caste is shown respect and recognised for their advancement of the greater good. And if questioned on the deference and near reverence shown to the leadership, the best translation of the idea out of the Tau tongue into another would probably be that of first among equals. Is it quite true? That's up for debate, but that's how the poor spin it anyway. So, now that you've had a bit of a history lesson and understand a little better the caste system in general, let's dive into specifics and look at the 5 castes as well as maybe some famous members as we go. To start, let's do the caste that most of you are probably most familiar with, the Fire caste, the Shas. This caste was formed from the former Plains Dwellers, the most warlike and hot-blooded of the Tau, hence the assignment of fire as their associated element. They are also the most physically powerful of all Tau, especially post-Ethereals thanks to a breeding program, though some would argue that's not saying much due to the general reluctance of the Fire caste to engage in close combat, where said strength would be at its most relevant. Having been hunters on Tau before Fio'taun, it is no surprise perhaps that the tactics of the Fire caste reflect their ingrained history. The saying amongst them is that technology advances with the years, but their tactics do not. Strategies are guided at the highest level by a tome known as the Code of Fire, which extols the Tau way of warfare as well as loyalty to the cause. The primary military grouping is known as a hunter cadre, and even the organization of individual units is influenced by the plains hunting tribes of millennia before. That said, it's not unheard of for especially preeminent commanders to devise new tactics not previously found within the Code of Fire. For example, the short-ranged Way of the Short Blade, created and successfully executed by Oshova. Every warrior of the Fire caste has been trained almost since birth. Their communes and training domes are geared exclusively to the production of the finest soldiers, both physically and mentally gifted enough to master the art form that is warfare. These trainees, those yet to sit the final exam, are known as Shas-Sal. You won't ever see one of these on the battlefield, as only those who complete training as a Shas-La will see any form of non-simulated combat. Those who fail will not be seen again, though I don't know the exact attrition rate. For the Shas-Sal who do complete their training and the rite of passage, they receive the rank of Shas-La and become an official fire warrior. They will then be assigned to, typically at least, an infantry unit known as a strike team that will be equipped far beyond the standard infantry of many races and drilled relentlessly in using said equipment, as well as using supporting fire to aid the rest of the cadre. Others deemed the most aggressive of the new recruits will instead be assigned to a breacher team, close-ranged infantry developed in response to Imperial bunkers and boarding actions that demanded close engagement, whilst many Shas-La will also volunteer for the selfless role of Pathfinder, a scout team often forced to sacrifice itself whilst scouting and aiming for the good of the cadre. If a Shas-La survives for 4 years of combat, they can take a rite known as the Trial by Fire, and those who succeed will attain the rank of Shas-Wi. These veterans can be found leading teams of Shas-La, but they also receive the honour of being allowed to don the Herexfra and pilot a battlesuit, which we explored in full in a previous log. Some choose not to do this and become Cadre Fireblades or Shas-Nel, but they are generally in the minority. Further trials can be taken after a few more years, allowing for promotion to Shas-Fre, Shas-El, and then finally, if proven to be a repeated success on the battlefield, Shas-O. This is the highest rank any fire caste member can reach, and it is held until death or retirement or joining the Chassar Tol, the high command of the fire caste for the most exceptional. To hold the rank of Chasseur is to be renowned as a master of war and something of a military genius, and though every commander will have a preferred method for waging war, they will be more than capable of using many different strategies within the Code of Fire. The best known and most widely practiced of these strategies both date back to the Plains Hunters and represent different approaches to the hunt now applied to warfare. They are known as Mont, the killing blow, or Fio'taun, the patient hunter, roughly translated into the human language. The former of these is based on the idea of the hunter running its prey down and relies on a near overwhelming and rapid strike with mobile and concentrated firepower. A Mont is relentlessly planned and only unleashed at the optimum moment with the go-ahead of a scouting Pathfinder team, but it will be instantly called off if it risks descending into a war of attrition that is frowned upon by the Firecast. The latter and older technique, Fio'taun, relies on luring the prey, in this case the enemy army, into a trap and ambush using warriors or tempting objectives. The chasse places little to no value on territory aside from using it as a place to kill from, but an advocate of Fio'taun will use it and their own troops both to manipulate their foes into taking the bait and then taking them out once they have done so. The truly great practitioners of the technique will lay traps and plans within the overarching strategy, pulling the foe all over the battlefield and destroying them at leisure. There are also many lesser-known techniques that can be put into practice should Mont or Fio'taun be unsuccessful, or if a foe has exposed itself in a certain way. For example, you may have never heard of Rin Yon, an encircling stratagem, or perhaps Rip Ka, which relies on an approach akin to death by 1,000 cuts. However, whatever approach is taken by a cadre or the wider coalitions composed of multiple castes in concert, the same underlying principles remain constant. The Tau way of warfare is underpinned by ranged superiority and exceptional mobility. Needless loss of life and Pyrrhic victories are frowned upon, and the chaos of melee means that pre-planning and strategy can become lost, and so it is avoided. Such has been the way of the Code of Fire since its inception, and so it shall likely always be. Though many sing the praises of Oshova in the Enclaves and Oshacera in the Empire, no Tau has ever had, or perhaps will ever have, encompassed the Code of Fire quite like the individual who taught them, Commander Fio'taun. Born on the Sept world of Dalith in 651 M41, Fio'taun was apparently so gifted as a commander that he managed to make war annoying for the orcs. When you convince the Begel you're too annoying to fight, you must be doing something right. He is credited with the creation of at least 2 septs during the second sphere of expansion, and may well have contributed to the founding of more through the efforts of himself and his warriors, and he also clashed with the Imperium as the second sphere ended during the Damocles Gulf Crusade. However, he was severely wounded and forced to retire to Mount Kanji on Dalith, where he helped to train Oshova, Oshacera, Okais and others, as well as penning philosophy and military doctrine. Though many of his students have gone on to become legends, they are specialised by comparison to their tutor. Farsight is the master of Mont, Shadow Sun mistress of Fio'taun, but Fio'taun mastered them all, and few, if any, can emulate his understanding. Such was his importance that his mind was scanned on order of the Ethereals to form an AI replicating him, allowing his knowledge to live on after his death. And some commanders may be given a neurochip first developed in the Damocles Crusade to allow them to access a measure of his prodigious tactical acumen. After the Fire Caste, and obviously the Ethereals because you can't get away from the fact they exist, the caste perhaps best known by other races is the Water Caste, the Poor. This caste was formed from the merchant traders that would rove across Ta'au in the pre-Ethereal days, and this is reflected by their role in society since Fio'taun. The Water Caste of today still perform mercantile duties, but their task has spread from simple trade and occasional diplomacy to cover all administrative roles as well. The Water Caste flow just like the element they are named after, moving through society to ensure it runs smoothly, whether that be handling bureaucratic issues or negotiating a trade deal or anything else that isn't solved by a simple application of violence or a spanner. In most cases, the first Tau ever met by a Xenos race will be a member of the Water Caste, as they are responsible for all initial interspecies interactions that do not require the heavy hand of the Fire Caste. As we have discussed in our log on the Tau auxiliaries a fair while ago, it will be the agents and ambassadors of the poor who will attempt to integrate the species they meet into the ideas of the Tau Va, though it is usually a slow and subtle flip as opposed to an arm-twisting takeover, though this can and does happen if the Shas are required to get involved. Rather than open with the idea of joining the greater good en masse, the Water Caste will revert to their roots and instead present themselves and the Tau as a trading partner. They will then use any negotiated trade deals to introduce the oft superior Tau technology to the target worlds, winning over the locals with their benevolence and the clear benefits that partnership with the Tau can provide. The Fire Caste are presented in these exchanges as guards rather than warriors, and there are worlds that end up joining the Tau Va without a single shot being fired by either side, though this is rarer than the propaganda merchants of the poor would probably let on. Often, even worlds and cultures that sign on wholesale are allowed to maintain said cultures after the Tau have taken over. Trying to, for example, supplant a millennia-old faith in the God Emperor of mankind is basically impossible, and so the Imperial Creed is somewhat allowed to stand when a human world is flipped. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the duties of the Water Caste require a remarkable knack for diplomacy, and the wider need for the integration of auxiliaries means that linguistics is all but essential for all of the poor. Their members have only become better and better at it as time has gone on, though the success rate for world or auxiliary conversion isn't something I know off the top of my head. However, whilst there are of course dedicated members of the poor that specialise in diplomatic and linguistic studies, the vast majority will be more likely to be found in an administrative role. In fact, if an Ethereal is not available to govern a converted world or an established sept, it will be a member of the Water Caste, probably a poor O, who will be the governor as opposed to one of the Fire Caste. On the other side of the coin, whilst the poor are the most sociable and visible of the castes, the core are rarely seen on a planet's surface these days. Known as the Air Caste, these Tau were the mountain dwellers back in the pre-Ethereal times, those ones with the hollow bones and the membrane wings used for a form of flight. Nowadays the membranes are gone, but the Air Caste are still both the tallest and the slimmest of all Tau. They have also evolved somewhat to live almost exclusively aboard spaceships or orbital platforms with lower gravity, and on some sept worlds such as the high-gravity Viola, I wouldn't be surprised if the core couldn't survive on the surface. This has given the Air Caste the nickname of the Invisible Caste due to how rarely they are seen, but their role in Tau society is still a critical one. It is no surprise that their former gift of flight means the Air Caste formed the Tau's navy, known officially as the Corvatra. It is the Air Caste ships and the Air Caste members piloting them, whether atmospheric or spacebound, as well as any orbital stations and the like, and it is believed that they hold some biological advantages over the pilots of other races. G-force tolerance and general perception are both higher amongst the core than, say, Gela, but the short lifespans of the Tau mean that long-lived aces from other species can still hold the advantage through experience. Most will know the Corvatra best for the same reasons as those behind the Shas being the best known caste of all, their presence in war. Typical Tau fleets have smaller but faster ships compared to their adversaries, with many atmospheric craft such as the Barracuda or the Manta able to pull double duty and fight in space too. They are not warp capable due to the lack of psychers in the Tau race, but they haven't needed to be up to this point thanks to near light speed engines, especially with the Startide Nexus wormhole now offering a new means of travel. The Air Caste will also join the Shas on the ground battle, with pilots manning various bombers and fighters to aid the Fire Caste to win air superiority or to clear priority targets. The most popular amongst the Fire Warriors is the ground attack craft designated the AX-3 Razor Shark, but there's many more than just that. However, a race does not survive and an empire does not flourish based on military power alone. Trade and transport are both utterly vital. And so the Corvatra also encompasses the Tau's merchant navy as well as the military one, ensuring that the poor and their goods can travel between the septs to do business, whilst also transporting civilians or other groups around the empire or the enclaves. Many of the core, when not piloting or performing courier duties, live aboard orbital stations due to their low gravity adaptations. These space-bound cities provide a home for the air caste and a docking point for the Corvatra, but some more military platforms are thrust out into deep space between sets and known as Ta Shiro, fortress stations in the void that can hold warriors and resupply a fleet that's either low on fuel, warriors, or ammo. Now we conclude by moving into both familiar and unfamiliar territory, both for myself and for those who have heard of or met the Tau. First, the last of the 4 elemental castes, the Fio, the Earth caste. By process of elimination, you should already know who the Fio descend from, the river valley dwellers and city builders of ancient Tau. This means that it was one of their cities, Fio'taun, that the Ethereals emerged at, as the name should indicate in case you missed it. The Earth caste were the first builders, farmers, and settlers in Tau society, and this has continued on in many ways with societal roles today. They still work the earth from which they draw their caste name as farmers and labourers, but it is in their ability to shape and build that has seen the Fio win great renown. They are the scientists, the engineers, the artisans of the Tau Va, designing and building technology that has become feared and marvelled at across the galaxy for its potency and design. The Herexfre donned by the Chasse, the Fio envisioned and constructed it. The ships of Corvatra and their near light-speed engines, the Fio designed and constructed that from the ground up all the way to the skies. The highest ranked, the Fio'el and Fio'o, are inventors extraordinaire, but all the way down to the Fio'la and Fio'sal, it is always the Earth caste that underpin the Tau Va. Pushed by the Ethereals, the demands of their sept, or by their own minds, the Fio make real what was spoken of at Fio'taun. As the primary workforce, it is perhaps no surprise that the Earth caste are also the most numerous by a fair margin across both the Empire and the Enclaves. They are also the shortest and stoutest of the caste, though not the strongest, as that is the Chasse, and they are known for speaking bluntly and in a rather monotone way. Practicality rules all for the Earth caste, but for all their wonders, they are not perfect. Much of the technology used by the other castes is in an experimental phase of some sort, such as the XV-104 Riptide battlesuit and its Nova reactor previously only used by the Corvatra. Many attempts have been used to siphon the power of stars, but with no success. Several have been sent to premature supernova in hostile regions now known as sunbursts. Efforts to comprehend the Immaterium and even the Startide Nexus have proved slow, if not impossible, with psychic powers being chalked off as mind science in the early days of contact with the Imperium. And all that is stuff seen by those outside of the Fio. I don't want to ponder how many dark experiments are carried out in an underground lab, or how many in-house tests go wildly awry every Tau Seer. But of course, there is one more caste we must address, the ones responsible for the creation of the task system and the Tau Va, depending on how the poor spin it, the Ethereals. Known as the Aun in the Tau tongue, a word which has a double meaning of celestial, the Ethereals rule over Tau society with an iron will and a subtle iron fist. The Tau of the Empire are taught loyalty to the Ethereals above even the Empire itself, and it is all but common knowledge that if one of the Aun tells a Tau to do something, it is done, no matter what. There are exceptions that prove the rules, such as Oshova and later Shasso Rin, but the Ethereals still hold the power to kill any Tau they choose to without lifting a finger or even having to ask nicely. If a decision of importance is to be taken, then the Aun will take it alone. The other castes may advise in an elemental council, but they may not choose the path to follow, and the Ethereals will try to balance the flaws of the others in order to best advance the Tau Va. Their speeches are almost always calm, yet inspire the Tau in ways that only a fiery demagogue could achieve with another race, and the arrival of an Ethereal can turn a battle or campaign on its head just by the presence of the Aun. However, the Ethereals are not a collection of individual despots ruling over their own septs as they see fit, though they absolutely could do that if they wanted to, given the devotion shown by the other castes. Instead, the Aunar Tol, the Ethereal Council led by the Ethereal Supreme, serves as a way to guide the Empire together and indeed the galaxy into the enlightenment of the Tau Va, or at least their version of it anyway. Many more primitive races actually buy into the idea of deification of the Ethereals, and the Aun do nothing to dispel this myth despite its falsehood, as it helps to quell rebellion and establish dominance over a new world. Quite how the Ethereals have engineered this situation of almost royal standing and devotion bordering on spiritual zealotry, no one really knows, and the Empire does its best to ensure no Ethereal is killed or captured to allow the galaxy to find out. Speculations of pheromonal control or psychic dominion abound, but whatever it is damned effective. However, whatever it actually so happens to be, it is not hard-coded into Tau genetics. After all, the Farside enclaves have survived for centuries now without the guidance of the Aun. Some say within the Empire that losing the Aun would be to return to the Mont Tau, but that's strictly and quantifiably false, so questions remain as to the nature of the Ethereals and their dominion over most of the Tau race. Perhaps one day the truth will out, and I for one look forward to that day, as the fall of the Aun, but not the Tau, may likely follow it soon after. And there you have it, an insight into the castes of the Tau and the society of the Tau Va as a whole. Whilst rigid and enforced, the system has played to the strengths of the already divergent Tau species in the name of accelerated progress and specialised abilities. First envisioned and built by the Ethereals after the union at Fio'taun, the castes have proved so successful as to survive even without the Aun to force the issue, and will likely continue to endure right until the fall of the Tau as an empire or species, if that ever comes. For now though, we must move on. Next time, I'm going to do that one thing that I always tell myself I'm never going to do again after I do it. No, we're not going into the warp, I'm used to that by now after all our logs on the Neverborn and all things demonic. Instead, I'm going to look at the leaders of perhaps the most fortified place in or out of real space, the factions who keep this entire realm in its stable anarchy and commit atrocities in the name of survival. Thank you for watching Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.